In this video, we'll learn about Redshift Sun and Sky. Redshift Sun and Sky gives you a very simple way to resemble real-world sun and sky as you move and position the sun in your scene depending on its height and angle, its color and intensity, and the sky's color and intensity will adjust to give you a realistic looking sun and sky. There are two ways to create a sun and sky rig in Redshift, manual and automatic. First, let's see the manual way. If you go to the Redshift menu under lights, there is a physical sun, and under objects, you have Redshift sky. You can add a Redshift sun and then add a Redshift sky. Next, select the Redshift sky and go to the Sun tab and simply add the previously created physical sun to the sun field. And now you have a sun and sky rig. But there is a Redshift sun and sky rig which does that automatically. So let's delete the current sun and sky. Now back to the Redshift menu. Under objects, you can find Redshift sun and sky rig. So let's add one. And here it is. We got a Redshift sky which points to the Redshift sun that is currently its child. We can just select the sky object and control the whole rig from there. So let's start IPR, and because this is a heavy scene, hundreds of thousands of geometries, it will take some time for the render to start. And now we can adjust the position of the sun in the scene and the sky texture will change to match that position. Now, if we just put the sun lower, quite close to the horizon line, right now, because the sun sits on the horizon line, we get a very dark sky close to sunset or sunrise. But if I grab the sun and rotate it below the horizon line, we start to get a much darker sky. And at some point, the light will start to die out. And that's where you need to rage against the dying of the light. Now let's start moving the sun above the horizon line to get some nice sunshine. I'm going to position the sun in a way where we can see the sun disk itself. I'm going to change the HP and B rotation values to 95, 10, and 63. So we can take a look at the sun and sky options. The first thing I want to do is to go to the sun tab and zero out this sun glow intensity to get rid of this weird glow around the sun. Now we can get back to the sky tab and see what we have. Intensity multiplier controls the overall brightness of the sky and sun. If set it to 0, we have essentially turned it off. And if I start increasing the intensity to 1, 2, or even 3, each time we get brighter and brighter sun and sky. Now, if you added a sun and sky rig and notice your render is way too bright out of the box for whatever reason, you shouldn't play around with the intensity value that much as it is physically correct. Instead, you need to adjust your camera's exposure, and to do that, simply open up render view settings, enable global photographic exposure settings, and now you can use ISO, shutter speed, or f-stop to control the exposure like a real world camera. In this case, we can try increasing the f-stop to get the image darker. Obviously, because we have a well exposed render, we don't need to do that. So let's disable photographic exposure and get back to our sun and sky. Now, if you didn't have proper exposure controls enabled for your camera when the intensity might be way more than what you want, you can enable this use non-physical intensity checkbox. And this will kind of give you a bit more well-exposed render. Let's disable it for now. Next, we can determine the sky model. There are two models available in Redshift, Hosek Wilkie and Pritham. Honestly, there are better sky models out there that can result in more realistic sky shaders, especially at sunset and sunrise. Hopefully the devs can work on them and make them available within Redshift as well, but these two are what we have right now. Let's see how they look at noon, afternoon, or evening and sunset. We can go to the coordinate tab, and by adjusting the P rotation, control the sun's position throughout the day. Let's try -20 to simulate noon. And now the image is a bit overexposed, and we can use this non-physical intensity checkbox or adjust the exposure. And let's try both of the models and see which one looks better. Now let's set the rotation to 0 to get something close to afternoon, and make sure to get back to our original exposure and try both of the models again. Then let's try 10 degrees for evening and take a look at both of the models at this time. And finally, something like 20 degrees for sunset, and try both models. So generally, Hosack-Wilke model gives a more realistic sky model, but ultimately it depends on the look you are after. And as I mentioned, there are sky models that are simply better, and hopefully we'll have them in Redshift in the future. Who knows? For now, let's set the P rotation to 10 degrees and use the Hosack-Wilke model. Let's pick up the pace and take a look at this atmosphere section of the sky model. Turbidity controls the amount of pollution, dust, and particles in the sky. Lower values like 2 would result in a cleaner sky. And as you increase this value to something like 5, 7, 10, or 15, you can see the sky gets polluted. Let me put it back to 2, which is the default value, so we can get our clear sky back. Next, we have ozone, which controls the color of the sunlight. By default, it's set to 0.35, which is commonly used for the Earth's atmosphere. And you can alter this value from 0 to 1. At 0, you get a bit more of a yellowish orangish tone. And at 1, you would get cooler and bluer sunlight. It's not that noticeable, but it's there. Horizon height lets you offset the horizon line in the sky. Let's try 0.5, 1, and 1.5. Also, negative values will lower the horizon line. For now, we can set it to 1 to see what the function of the next parameter is. Horizon blur controls the size of the gradient between the horizon and the actual sky. The default value is 0.1. If set to 0, we get a hard line between the ground and the sky. And as I increase it to 0.2, 0.4, or even 1, for example, the dividing line will become blurrier. For now, let's set it back to 0.1. Ground color determines the color of the ground in the sky texture. As I change the ground color, you can see how the color of the ground is changing in the sky texture. For now, let's set the horizon height, blur, and ground color to their default values. And the night color, as the name suggests, controls the color of the sky at night when sun goes down below the horizon. To see how that works, let's change the P rotation of the sky to 25 degrees. Now we can change the night color maybe to a very dark and deep blue. Great. For now, let's get back to the default color and change the rotation to 10 degrees. We also have this color adjustment section, a red blue shift, which as the name suggests allows you to shift the colors of the sky towards red at positive values and blue at negative values. Obviously 0 is the physically accurate value here, and saturation controls the overall color saturation of the sky texture. Let's set these values to their default and take a look at the sun tab. Sun disk intensity controls the intensity of the visible sun disk. At 0, the sun disk will no longer be visible. to the camera while still affecting the lighting, and at 1 we get the full intensity. Next, we have this sun disk scale, which allows you to scale the size of the visible sun disk. By default, it is set to 1. As you increase this value, you are making the sun disk bigger and the shadows produced by the sun softer. Let's set it back to 1 for now. And you can use this sun glow intensity to add a fake glow around the sun. I'm gonna actually just disable it for now. Let's quickly take a look at this override tab as well. Force alpha to 0 checkbox. When unchecked, the sun and sky will be calculated in the alpha channel, as you can see. And if checked, it won't add to the alpha channel. If you don't want to see the sun and sky in your render, you can uncheck this background checkbox. And finally, using this reflection, refraction, and GI checkboxes and intensities, you can control how much the sky shader will affect those ray types. For example, if I don't want the sun and sky rig to be visible in the reflections of our shaders in the scene, I can disable reflections, or if we want to see less reflections, we can lower the amount of reflection intensity. Or if I didn't want the sky shader to contribute to the global illumination, I can simply uncheck this GI checkbox. To make the sun and sky more realistic, we can open up our render view settings and enable bloom, flare, and streak, and add some nice lens effects to our bright sun. I'm gonna add some bloom first. Then add glare or streak. And finally, some lens flare. Now we can start changing the position of the sun in the sky to get some nice renders. You can obviously do that on your own. As always, I'll be rendering a few different looks and save them to the render folder in your project files, as well as the saved version of that scene. So that's about V-Ray sun and sky. See you in the next one.